Hello, good day everyone. Today I would like to do some knowledge sharing on understanding of PDPA, Malaysia's Personal Data Protection Act versus the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation under the European Union. What is data protection? Data protection is the set of principles, laws, policies, and practices designed to ensure that personal data is collected, processed, stored, and shared in a lawful, fair, and secure manner. It is rooted in the idea that individuals have a fundamental right to privacy and control over their personal information. Both PDPA and GDPR aim to protect personal data and regulate how organizations handle it. There are some similarities for both PDPA and GDPR, which there are principle-based approach, more on consent, focus on transparency, encourage subject rights, and have cross-border rules. Some key differences will mainly focus on GDPR, which is a bit broader, stricter, with stronger rights and accountability measures, of course with much higher fines. Let's dig further in the key changes introduced for PDPA back in November 2024. First, the main reason is to align Malaysia data protection laws to be more closely and to be more in line with international standards like the EU GDPR. Some terminology updates, which is the key for data user, now has been changed to data controller. So data user is already obsolete, so data controller is aligning with the global standards. Mandatory Data Protection Officer, DPO. Previously, Data Protection Officer is considered optional, but now it is a compulsory. It's mandatory for an organization to appoint a DPO if they are a data controller or a data processor and notify the commissioner. Guidelines on qualification and obligation are expected from the regulator. Data breach notification. Controllers must notify the Personal Data Protection Commissioner promptly within timely manner stipulated in the policy and process. If the breach is likely to cause significant harm, data subjects must also be informed. Data processor accountability. Processors now have direct obligation, such as ensuring the security principle is upheld. Previously, for PDPA in Malaysia, data processor was not put under a strict requirement where only data subjects and data controllers have a bit more heightened requirement. Right to data portability. This is something new. So data subject can now request their data to be transferred to another controller in a compatible electronic format subject to feasibility. So data portability is something new, which is a data subject, people like us, can actually request for us to give from organization A to transfer our data to organization B. Cross-border data transfers. The prior whitelisting regime is replaced with a more flexible model allowing transfers to countries with equivalent data protection standards. Expanded sensitive data. The biometric data, which mainly our facial recognition, our thumb recognition, even our voice recognition, is now explicitly designated as sensitive personal data requiring explicit consent. Stricter penalties and enforcement. Penalties increase to a maximum fine of RM1 million ringgit and or 3 years imprisonment. So the penalties has been increased really broad from the previous one, which is only RM 300,000 and years of imprisonment is only 2. So it's almost triple from 300 million ringgit to RM 1 million ringgit. Authorities can also conduct a proactive audit. Exclusion clarified. Personal data of deceased individual who already passed away is now explicitly excluded from PDPA coverage. So in short, only applicable to a living form, which is If you're already deceased, in a way, if you're dead, you're no longer alive, PDPA doesn't apply to you. Summary of a PDPA versus GDPR. The Personal Data Protection Act, which is PDPA, mainly used in Malaysia, was enacted in 2010 and enforced in 2013 with the latest amendment in 2024. The scope applies to commercial transactions involving personal data in Malaysia, exclude government and personal household use. Main regulator will be the Personal Data Protection Commissioner, which is the PDPC. Penalties, again, I would like to highlight on the penalties. Maximum penalties have been risen from RM 300 ringgit Malaysia to 100 ringgit, 1 million Malaysia ringgit, and the maximum prison term has been extended from 2 to 3 years. Again, triple from 300 ringgit Malaysia to RM 1 million ringgit Malaysia. And the prison term has also been added from 2 to 3 years. There are 7 core principles of a PDPA, which is general, notice and choice, disclosure, security, retention, data integrity, and access. Number 1, general principle. Personal data can only be processed if the individual, which is the data subject, has given consent, unless an exception applies. Example, a bank must obtain your consent before using your personal details. That is, example, phone number, email, to send their marketing materials. Number 2, notice and choice principle. Individual must be informed about the purpose of data collection and given a choice to opt out. If you agree, you can always opt in. Example, an online retailer must provide a privacy notice explaining that your address will be used for delivery, and you can choose not to receive promotional emails. Number 3, disclosure principle. Personal data cannot be disclosed to third parties without consent, except for authorized purposes involving regulators and also legal obligations. Example, a hospital cannot share your medical records with an insurance company unless you have consented, except where legally required. Number 4, security principle. Organization must take reasonable steps to protect personal data from loss, misuse, unauthorized access, modification, or even disclosure. Example, a university must ensure that student databases are password protected and encrypted, preventing unauthorized access. Number 5, retention principle. Personal data must not be kept longer than necessary for the purpose it was collected. Example, an employer should delete a rejected job applicant CV after the hiring process unless consent is obtained to retain it for future opportunities. Number 7. 6. Data integrity principle. Reasonable steps must be taken to ensure that personal data is accurate, complete, and up-to-date. Example, a bank must update your address in their records promptly when you notify them of a change. Number 7, access principle. Individuals have the right to access their personal data and correct inaccuracies. Example, a telecom company must provide you access to your billing records and allow you to correct errors if you find wrong charges or outdated details. So I hope that you guys have some basic understanding now what is PDPA versus GDPR. So let me dive into Personal General Data Protection Regulation, which is GDPR, under the European Union EU. It was enforced in 2018. The scope applies to all controllers and processors in the European Economic Area, EEA, and globally if processing personal data of EEA residents. Regulators, supervisory authorities in each EU country coordinated by the European Data Protection Board, EDPD. Penalties. Maximum penalty for a GDPR violation is the higher of euro 20 million or 4% of the organization total worldwide annual turnover from the preceding financial year. This is a significant difference of a GDPR penalties compared to a PDPA because PDPA has a standard predefined penalties amount and terms of jail imprisonment. For GDPR, it has given some sort of amount, which is the highest will be euro 20 million, but it can also be applicable to the 4% of your organization total wide annual turnover. So like I mentioned earlier, GDPR focus on more rigid and more robust and more stringent. The penalties, which is the higher maximum penalty, is reserved for serious infringements of the regulation core principle, such as infringements of data processing principles or data subjects' rights. There is also a standard maximum penalty. So we have one higher maximum penalty of euro 20 million and a standard maximum penalty for less severe violation, which is up to 10 million euro. So the higher maximum penalty will be around euro 20 million and the standard maximum penalty, which less of a severe violation, will be up to euro 10 million or 2% of your global annual turnover, whichever is higher. Similarly to core principle of PDPA, GDPR has also 7 core principles, which is lawfulness, fairness and transparency, purpose limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and not forgetting accountability. Number 1, lawfulness, fairness and transparency. Data must be processed lawfully, fairly and in transparent manner toward individuals. Example, an e-commerce site must explain in plain language how customer data will be used, example, for delivery, and they can also market to opt-in or opt-out. It cannot strictly sell data to third parties. Number 2, purpose limitation. Data must be collected for specified, explicit and legitimate purpose and not further processed in ways incompatible with those purposes. Example, a university collects student data for academic enrollment. It cannot later use that data for unrelated marketing campaigns without consent of the students. So every time they want to use it for a different purpose, it has to be with a new consent. Number 3, data minimization. Data collected must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary for the intended purpose. Example, a gym asking for a customer name and emergency contact is fine. Asking for details like religion or marital status not relevant to the membership would breach this principle. Number 4, accuracy. Data must be accurate and keep up to date. Inaccurate data should be corrected and erased without a delay. Example, a bank must update a customer's new address when notified to avoid sending statements to the wrong location. Number 5, storage limitation. Data must not be kept longer than necessary for the purpose for which it was collected. Example, a hotel should not keep guest ID scans indefinitely after checkout, only for the period required for legal or accounting purposes. Number 6, integrity and confidentiality, which is more on security. Data must be processed securely with protection against unauthorized or unlawful processing, accidental loss, destruction, or damage. Example, a healthcare provider must encrypt patient records and restrict access to unauthorized staff only. Number 7, accountability. The data controller is responsible for complying with all the principles and must be able to demonstrate compliance. Example, the company must keep records of consent, conduct data protection impact assessment, which is DPIA, data protection impact assessment, which is DPIA, which is different from privacy impact assessment, and train employees on PDPA or GDPR compliance so they can prove adherence to regulators if audited. In this case, it will be mainly on PDPR. I hope come to the stage where I already given basically the fundamental information on what is PDPA versus GDPR, and also sharing the examples of the 7 core principles. So both PDPA and GDPR has 7 core principles, which is slightly different in the definition, but the statement of the understanding and similarities is actually the same. I want to go further on the data subject rights, which has been expanded under 2024 amendment. So if you were to refer to the 2010 version of Personal Data Protection Act in Malaysia, the data subject rights has already been basically expanded, and there are some addition of new rights. Core rights under PDPA 2010, you do have a right to access personal data, right to correct inaccuracies, right to withdraw consent, right to limit processing for marketing. But moving forward, based on the 2024 amendments, the new right, which is effective in June 2025, is the right to data portability, transfer data between controllers, right to be notified of breaches that may cause significant harm. So like I mentioned earlier of the subjects, that we don't only, when we have an incident of data breach, meaning data leakage or violation of privacy of data protection, you don't only just inform your internal risk which for them to do the incident management or maybe compliant for them to put it in the data registry. Not only that, you have to inform the commissioner, the Personal Data Protection Commissioner, but the most important thing, you need to inform people like you, which is the data subject. So a cloud provider hosting a Malaysian bank customer database must now independently ensure PDPA compliance and can face direct penalty for breaches. So again, for those which is used to be called a data processor, which mainly like a cloud provider hosting, all your data, which is apart from the internal server. Any banks in Malaysia, which is governed by PDPA, the customer database must now independently ensure PDPA compliance and they can face direct penalty for the breaches. Remember, the penalty was earlier maximum 300 ringgit Malaysia, but now it's already 1 million ringgit Malaysia. So, in short, for data subject rights, the expansion under the 2024 amendment is the right to data portability and the right to notify of breaches that may cause significant harm. Just now we were talking about the data subjects. Now let's talk about the data controller obligation, where they are used to be called data user. The data controller obligations mainly are put in because they are the decision makers. Financial institutions face additional requirements under Bank Negara Malaysia, which is the central bank, because they have specific policy document like management of customer information and permitted disclosure, to be more of a robust governance framework beyond the basic requirement of PDPA. So if you are practicing or opening up a company in Malaysia, you are most likely to be governed under PDPA, which is Data Protection in Malaysia, Personal Data Protection Act. And apart from just adhering to the governance legislation requirement, which is the PDPA Act, if you are in an FI industry, financial industry like banks, you also have to abide and comply to the central bank, which is Bank Negara Malaysia governance requirement as well. So we were talking about adhering to compliance. So the data controller obligation is quite straightforward. They must comply with the PDPA principle. They must ensure that the appointment of DPO is basically officially been appointed and must also notify the Data Protection Commissioner. Any new thing which is breach of notification of a data subject, where there's a breach of data privacy, it has to be promptly notified to the Commissioner as well. And consent management. Make sure that consent management are being obtained and maintained valid from the data subject, which enhance requirement for sensitive data, including biometric. So in short, for data controller, the four main things will be to ensure compliance with the PDPA principle, must make sure that the DPO are being appointed and being notified to the Commissioner. Any breach of notification that can give maybe a rise of risk and impact and issue to the data subject will also need to be promptly notified to the Commissioner and inform the data subject, is people like us, if significant harm is likely to happen. Again, consent management is top priority. You have to obtain prior collecting, processing, and transmitting any data from the data subject and ensure valid consent from the data subject are being acquired, and there are enhancement requirements for sensitive data, which is categorized as biometrics. So all these four is something which need to be abide, closely monitored by the data controller. So we have data subject, and then we also have data controller, then we have data processor. Data processor obligation, which the service provider. So there are critical change in 2024 amendment. Data processor now have direct legal obligation under the PDPA, but not just contractual duties to data controller. Meaning, they need to align with one of the core principle, which is the security principle. So apart just abiding to the contract agreement that they sign with the data controllers, they need to fulfill, apart from the contractual duties, to ensure security measures, meaning must implement appropriate technical and organization safeguard, and to ensure that direct liability can be held directly accountable for mishandling of personal data. So direct liability to data processor, and controller instruction. Process data only according to documented controller instruction. For data processor, you are not allowed to process any data if it's out of the scope of the controller instruction. Again, the PDPA 2024 amendments aligns terminology with global standards like GDPR, which change data user to data controller, creating direct obligation for data processor who were previously only indirectly accountable, and giving data subject some new rights. I just would like to recap what is a data subject. A data subject is any living individual whose personal data is processed. It can be a bank customers, insurance policy holders, or e-commerce shoppers. Who is a data controller? Any entity determining why and how a data is processed. Any entity, meaning any organization or companies, that determine why and how data is processed. Example will be banks and financial institutions, retailers and online businesses, and healthcare providers. Number 3, data processor. Also an entity, which organization and company, which is doing processing data on behalf of the data controller. It can be cloud service provider, payroll processors, IT vendors, and consultant. So we have covered quite a bit. So we already basically understand the main key summary of PDPA versus GDPR. We have deep dive into what is the core principle of GDPR versus PDPA. And at the same time, we also must ensure that what are the 3 main subjects key role in the data protection, which is the data subject, data controller, and data processor, and what are the implications against them if they were to not comply to the PDPA. Apart from just going into a data protection requirement, I also would like to share with you guys what is basically a data classification under Malaysia's PDPA. So there is actually two types of data classification, which is a personal data, and the second one is sensitive personal data. So only two types, which is personal data, and second one is sensitive personal data. What is a personal data? It is defined as information in respect of commercial transaction that relates directly or indirectly to a data subject, is capable of identifying the data subject, and is recorded in any form. So I would like to repeat. Personal data is a defined information in respect of commercial transaction that relates directly or indirectly to a data subject, is capable of identifying the data subject, and is recorded or documented in any form. So it can be physical or electronic. Example of a personal data: your name, your ID number, in Malaysia we call IC, is under my card, your passport number, your phone number, your email address, your residential or office address, your bank account details, or your employment information. The second one will be the sensitive personal data. This particular subset requires stricter consent requirements under the PDPA. It cannot be processed unless the data subject has given explicit consent or exception apply. Example, when it comes to legal requirements, protecting vital interests, medical purposes, or administration of justice. So apart from personal data, we have sensitive personal data. It falls under a stricter consent requirement under the PDPA. You have to give explicit consent, but there are exceptions apply, and it can be it's actually applicable when you cross some sort like a legal requirement or protecting a vital interest or an urgent medical purpose and administration of justice. So what is the example of sensitive personal data compared to personal data? So personal data, again, is your name and your ID number, your passport number, your phone number. Sensitive personal data goes more into your micro level of hygiene, which is physical or mental health condition, political opinions, religious belief or other similar belief, commission or alleged commission of any defense, any other personal data prescribed by the minister as sensitive. Again, a sensitive personal data example are physical or mental health condition, political opinions, religious belief or other similar beliefs, commission or alleged commission of any offence, any other personal data prescribed by the minister as sensitive. Apart from the data classification standard given by PDPA, I would also like to encourage you guys to adopt a data classification standard to be used internally. So in any part of your documentation, whether it's a physical or electronic, it can be your email, it can be your policies, it can be your business plan, it can be your business continuity plan. Any part of the documentation is required to be labeled and classified under a standard. It is definitely going to align with PDPA requirement, and it's a good practice to have that. Since PDPA itself only recognizes personal data and sensitive personal data, organizations in Malaysia often adopt internal classification models aligned with PDPA principles and security needs. There is actually a common 4-tier framework and classification level, which is public. So you can label your data as public. It is information intended for public release. Example of a public label of a data is anything that come across press release, advertisement, corporate information published on corporate website, or any social media announcement. but not limited to. So, number 2 is internal use. Internal use is on non-sensitive business data for internal use, meaning in use within your company. Predominantly, it will be available not on internet, but via your intranet. So the example is internal policies, internal business plan, business continuity plans, and newsletters. The third one, confidential. Data identifying an individual. Example, staff records, customer client contact details, product design details, bank statements, customer client documentations. And the last one, number 4, restricted and sensitive label. This is under PDPA sensitive categories, which is your health record, political religious affiliation, criminal data, company strategic plans or trade secrets, board papers with all the approval, and also a password. So let me recap again. The internal data classification standard that I would like to encourage for your organization to adopt. And we put it under 4 labels, which is number 1, public. So example of a public data, regardless is electronic or hard copy. Public can be press release, advertisement, corporate information published on corporate website, social media announcement. The number 1 is again public. The number 2 is anything that is labeled as internal use. So it can be anything that actually available within your organization. It can be also covering your branches, subsidiary, and affiliate companies. And most of the time, the data or information are readily available in your intranet, not internet. It's on your intranet. Example will be internal policies, internal business plan, business continuity plans, and newsletters. Number 3, data label as confidential. So example is staff records, customer client contact details, product design details, bank statement, customer clients documentation. And number 4 is the most important label, and you make sure that you label it correctly because it can give an impact to your organization as well. So it will be under label of restricted and sensitive. Example, health records, political religious affiliation, criminal data, company strategic plans, or your trade secrets. Your trade secrets is very important because it's a pillar and core of your company, business plan and target operating model, as well as your board papers because a lot of confidential things and a lot of approval are given within this. People can misrepresent and misuse and abuse information if it were to be not labeled correctly and maybe land in one of your company competitors or business competitors. And not forgetting the most important thing that people always take it lightly is your own password. So any password which actually give access to a data of information is considered restricted. So typically, those documentation that are labeled as restricted or sensitive will be encrypted. So it will be zipped and encrypted, and they will also be assigned with a password. So the management and the retention of the information for restricted is typically more stringent than the rest of the other label. So there are 4 labels of data classification standard, which is public, internal use, confidential, restricted, and sensitive label of data information. I hope that we have covered quite a number of things that you think you would like to make a reference as a PDPA versus GDPR understanding. And I also have given quite extensive, not only covering from the data protection requirement, I also have given the classification of the data type used by PDPA and also the classification data label used by your own organization to make sure it's considered can be a preventive control design in your data management and ensuring data privacy is upheld. I would like to also share on something a bit technical of we keep talking about data, but we also have heard something called metadata. So what is data and what is metadata? Again, let me give you a bit of information. So we have data and we have metadata. What is a data? A data is defined as a raw facts, figures, or information that carries meaning. Example of a data can be a customer's name, phone number, and email address. Or a bank transaction amount. Example, we have like maybe Malaysia ringgit 1,250, and it also have certain dates, which is 30th August 2025. Or it can be a university student exam scoring of 85% upon 100%. So those are all data. It raw facts is also carry figures. It represents some sort of information that carries meaning. So just for example, if you see a university student exam score of 85 upon 100%, and the passing requirement is 70%. So you know that this particular university student has already passed the exam. So in short, data will answer what is the information. So because it gives you quite straightforward, direct information. It can be numerical, it can be alphanumerical, it can be in many ways, but as long it represents some sort of a meaning and information, it will be labeled as data. The second one will be metadata. What is metadata? It is defined as data about data. It gives descriptive information that explain or gives context to the actual data. So this is something really tricky. So we have data, then we have metadata. So data is quite straightforward. Metadata is data about data. So I will give you some example for you not to be confused. So again, let me recap the example of a data. So data is any customer name, phone number, and email address, or a bank transaction amount, or a date of a bank transaction happen, or maybe a university student exam score. Okay, that is data. What is metadata example? For a customer record, when it was created, who entered it and last update. So in short, a metadata, it can be like an audit trail. It can be like an origination of the data creation. So when it was created, who modified it, and when was its last update. So typically, if you go into a system and then we put some sort of a data, you can see the analytics behind it will say that it was created by whom on this date, then modified by whom. So there's like a rule of data creation, modification, and also data deletion. And that helps you to understand from the control design part of how data is being managed. For a bank transaction, it can be the transaction ID, timestamp, location, device use. So it's not really that data per se that you use it like it carries meaning, but it carries like a timestamp, like an audit trail. So when you have a bank transaction, if you just walk into the counter and deposit an X amount of money, and then you just say that it was successfully done. Of course, you want to see it printed there saying when it was done, what time, by whom, how much was it, to which account number, who are the bannee of that, who are basically the sender. So you have all that. So you have the transaction ID, like successful when you deposit money in ATM, you see the unique reference of the transaction ID, then you have the timestamp. And it also indicate location because we have various of bank location and ATM location in Malaysia and what type of device. So sometimes you can say that you use ATM, sometimes you say you use your online banking, or sometimes you say you can use a QR code. So there's so many part of a bank transaction nowadays. For a student's exam score, it will state your subject name, your exam date, and grading rubric version. So this is different because your data for a student's exam will be the exam score, 85% upon 100%. But for a student exam score, it will not be that. It will be more on the subject name. It can be a bit generic compared to the data because data is more refined and more straightforward. So again, data answers what is the information. So you know, when you look at the data, you know, okay, what is the information? It gives meaning. A metadata answers on how, when, where, or by whom was the data created, processed, or stored. So if you were to go into a simple analogy, a data is where the content of a book. So when you open up a book, there will be a content of the book. So you have the story inside there, the storyline, the facts and numbers inside there. The metadata will be the information on the book cover and catalog card. So it has got nothing to do with the book content. It's just like a context of the book. So the book definitely has the book cover, and of course it has the catalog card ID. So it will state there, apart from the content, it will be indicating the title, the author, the publication date, the ISBN genre, the number of pages. So this is mainly located or found in the external part of the book, which is the book cover. It can be from the front part, it can be from the behind part. So it will be at the front and the back of the book. But data is the whole storyline, the content of the book. So it has story, it has some facts, it has pictures, it has numbers, it can be anything. As long when you go and read it or look at it, it carries meaning. Okay. There are a significant reason why we have to understand what is data and metadata. Why it matters. I think from compliance and compliance context, so for governance and compliance context, when you know what is the data, you know what you need to protect and how you can protect it. So data is the main subject of protection under laws like PDPA or GDPR. So it will be under your PII, which is the personal identifiable information. So it's a PII, personal identifiable information. So that will be for data. What is a metadata? Metadata also has their own role and is also critically important, and it matters for us to understand what is a metadata. So a metadata helps with governance, audits, and accountability. So you must be able to understand when is the logging of the access of the data, when it was modified, and how it flows across the system. Again, I would like to bring you back to the analogy of the book. When you want to buy a book, you pretty much know the title, right? But of course, you also know the content. But if you were to just give the title and the content, anything is pretty much under that, what we call it, information. So if I want to buy a book, typically I will need to understand, of course, the storyline, because somebody must have read the book and actually explain to me or share with me what is the content of the book. But I need to understand the context of the book as well. Maybe the color of the book, is it paperback, is it hardcover, and the information on the book cover, like I said, what is the title, because you can say you want a book about making sushi, but it will be so many type of book relating to making sushi. So you need to basically narrow down to, okay, that's the title of the book, who's the author. Of course, you need publication date, because some of the information, especially book which is more to reference book of it, which is a bit academic, you have to make sure that you go for a publication date which is more recent, which is more newer. You must know the ISBN numbers, the code behind the book, and the genre of the book and number of the pages. Because when you buy a book and you see the book is supposed to be 100 pages, at the content table of contents stated 100 pages, suddenly you see at the back of the book, it only comes up to 85 pages. So that must be something wrong. I mean, part of the content must be missing from the book. But again, apart from the context, the content of the book, which is a story, fact, numbers, pictures, are also important, because when you already got the book, in order for you to acquire the knowledge inside the book, which is the data information given in the book as part of the content, all that need to be in. So data and metadata is equally critical. You cannot just have data, which is the content. You need to also have metadata, which is the context of the book. Okay. Let me just go a bit more deeper. Let's deep dive in the summary aspects of the data versus metadata. So If you were to define a data in a very short manner, very short understanding. So a data is a core information or a content. A metadata is a processed information about the data. So what is the purpose of the data? It is to be processed, analyzed, or consumed. The purpose of metadata is to describe, manage, and give context to data. Again, like what I said about the analogy of the book, you might know the content of the book that you want to buy, but if you don't have the context, which the title, author, ISBN numbers, color of the book, and everything, you will not get the correct book. So examples of data can be customer name, invoice amount, photo pixels. Examples of a metadata will be data created when, file type, the author of it, or file size. So basically, this is all web analytics or data analytics behind the program. So it will be, in a way, people normally call it as audit trail. Okay, dependency. A data can stand alone as information. A metadata depends on a data and exists only to describe a data. So if you don't have a data, you cannot have a metadata. Okay. Use in governance. It is subject to privacy security rules, example PDPA and GDPR. Metadata subject to internal compliance, critical for classification, lineage, audit trails, and discovery. So let me recap again, what is data and metadata? I know it can be a bit confusing of what is data and metadata if you were to hear it for the first time. Let's recap it in the more simpler analogy. So a data is an actual content or information, and what must be protected, which is the PII, personal identifiable information, financial info, and health records, but not limited to that. So again, a data can be the customer name, transaction amount, medical diagnosis, and photo image pixel. So a metadata is information about the data. Of course, it's dependent highly on the data. They cannot exist without a data. It also governs the data classification, which is public, internal use, confidential, and restricted. A metadata is used for compliance in order to align with record management, retention periods, consent. So a metadata will tell when the data was created, who created it, what is the data classification, and what is a file type. It can be JPEG, it can be Word, it can be PowerPoint. It can also be apart from the file type, it can also be the size, capacity size of the data, and it can be anything that describes the features of the data. Okay, but the data alone is something where you use it, which carry meanings, and you can refer it as part of information. Okay, I would like to dive a bit more on what is metadata, because I think data is quite straightforward. Okay, this will be the last topic of understanding GDPR versus PDPA. So of course, most of my explanation and also supporting details and reference are mainly used to inline with PDPA, because the idea of the knowledge sharing is just to give those who are not located in Malaysia what is a PDPA, because PDPA is similarly like a GDPR. GDPR is widely used across the world, especially European Union, and PDPA is widely used in Malaysia only. So that's why I take the example of PDPA. So if you were to go into the types of metadata, there are some information of a metadata, which is number one, descriptive metadata. Descriptive metadata is information to identify and describe data. Example, title, author, keywords for document. Okay. So types of metadata. Number one is descriptive metadata, information to identify and describe data. Example can be the title, the author, the keywords for a document. The second one will be a structural metadata. how data is organized. Example, table relationship in the database, chapter arrangement in the book. So it's pretty much structured. So if you see like even your Excel file, you have tabs and everything, and it's actually have their row and columns. And if you were to just take a book, it will not just be one page from end to end. It will be put into a chapter, it will put into pages. So it is actually more structured. Number 3, administrative metadata, management information. Example, who created the file, who has the access right, who has the retention policy, encryption level, and so on. Number 4, provenance metadata, origin and history. Example, source system, transmission step in the ETL, and also audit trail. Number 5, technical metadata. So this is very important. Every time when you would like to extract any type of data, via is from your system, is it via from intranet, or is it via from internet that you actually try to download, it will be more on technical metadata. So the format and the system details. So example, the file type like CSV, docs, RIF, AIT, and any encoding or schema versions. So there are 5 types of metadata. Again, descriptive metadata, which is a title, author, keywords for a document. Structural metadata that give a table relationship in the database, all your tabs and everything, chapter arrangement in the book and the pages. Administrative metadata, which is the management information. So you can see administrative are more created files, access right, retention policy, encryption level. Provenance metadata is the origin and history. So you have your source system, transmission step, ETL, audit trail. Like typically when you save, who save it, who modified, you can see the control version, security version. And lastly, the technical metadata, which is the file type. So you have CSV, docs, AIT, AX, RIF, JPG, JPEG, all that are file type. And also includes encoding and schema version. So that is primarily the whole context of understanding a PDPA, which is the Malaysia's Personal Data Protection Act, versus the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which is under EU. So my articles has covered quite an extensive information. So I have given the introduction of what is PDPA versus GDPR, what are the key changes introduced in the amendment of PDPA back in 2024 versus the 2010 version, summary of PDPA versus GDPR, examples of PDPA in Malaysia, examples of Personal General Data Protection Regulation under the EU, which is GDPR, data subject right, which is expanded under 2024 amendment, data controller obligation on them being the decision maker on what to process, who to process, and when to process, data processor obligation, which are the service provider, mainly the cloud providers. I also have actually given some examples and elaborate further on key data protection rules under Malaysia PDPA, which is basically the data subject and also the data controller and the data processor, the data classification under Malaysia's PDPA, and also the data label, which is public, which is for internal use, which is confidential, which is restricted and sensitive data. I have actually also covered the personal data and sensitive data, personal data. The personal data and sensitive personal data. What is a personal data again? Personal data can be your name, your IC, your ID card number, your phone number, your address, whether it's company or your home address. Your sensitive personal data will be your health record, your religious, your political. That will be basically under sensitive personal data. So I has actually given some sort of a technical explanation apart from the governance information on what is a data. And so I actually has explained what is data versus metadata and summary aspect of both data and metadata and the key differences between data and metadata. And lastly, the type of metadata. With that, and by reading the articles that I have actually prepared, I hope this presentation will be able to facilitate you and navigate you when you are actually referring back to the article. And I hope that any information inside there are useful, helpful, and is simplified to make you understand on layman term. I do hope that both parties, me and you, can benefit from this particular session. The articles are being designed and structured and documented in a manner where it covers more of a Personal Data Protection Act requirement in Malaysia versus GDPR. So that's why the information are mainly used under PDPA requirement. I would like to thank you for your time, and I hope that the level of understanding has been increased. You managed to have some sort of knowledge acquisition. Thank you again, apart from the time, your patient understanding, going through all my lengthy information in the articles, and also quite lengthy video recording, because I would like to not miss all the important information given there. This particular information is labeled as internal because it's used within my CDPO, Certified Data Protection Officer training and examination. But once it's published, it will be put as a public. So don't worry, you out of intellectual property and prepared by me, but the information are mainly available, and I actually have taken and referred from a public reference point. So don't worry, you can actually use it, save it, and keep it, and share it with other people for the benefit of their knowledge as well. So this understanding of PDPA versus GDPR is labeled as public. So it's for public reference. Again, thank you for your time and your patience and your attention. May you have a great week ahead. Take care and cheers. Bye.